Welcome aboard the Boat Buyer's Secret Weapon podcast, where we're dedicated to helping first-time and experienced boaters find the right boat at the best price and ensure all boaters have years and years of happy boating fun because life truly is better on a boat. Today's podcast is sponsored by the best boat captain on the water training. It takes the stress, frustration, and swearing out of those dockings and other tough situations so you can have total control of your boat or pontoon. Visit bestboatcaptainonthewater.com for a short video and all the details. Now, let's hop aboard and have some fun. Welcome to the Boat Buyer's Secret Weapon podcast. I'm your host, Captain Matt, and today we've got another great guest. We're talking with Conservation Officer Brittany Hauser. Now, she works the Mississippi River up in Minnesota, so we're going to dive into some boating safety and just some kind of general common sense things when boating in that type of environment. So, Brittany, thanks for joining us.
Not a problem. Thanks for having me.
Let's start with kind of give the lay of the land. What does the Mississippi look like up in your area? What does a typical day look like for you? And what kind of boat are you out working on?
Yeah, so, everyone knows the Mississippi is one of the largest river systems within the United States. I am fortunate enough to cover approximately 40 miles of the Mississippi River as well as its backwaters. So I cover everything from the main channel of the Mississippi River all the way into the little, duck hunting sloughs, catfish sloughs, stuff like that. And kind of your typical day for me, one of the unique things about my section of the river is most of it is open year-round, which is kind of unusual for Minnesota. Most of our bodies of water freeze over, ice fishing and stuff like that we have in the winter. I still have sections that freeze over, but a vast majority actually stays open. So I'm on the river year-round almost.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I don't just have, the June to August boat season like a lot of other areas in Minnesota. I'm out checking fishermen in the middle of January sometimes. So it's kind of unusual for me, but the boats I operate, my typical everyday river boat is a 17.5-foot Lund fisherman. So just your typical fishing boat for this area. For my backwater sections and my little sloughs, for when I check duck hunters and stuff like that, I operate an 18-foot gator tail mud boat. And then I also have an American airboat Air Ranger, which we mostly use in the wintertime for ice rescues and situations like that. It's a great resource for us. Because for ice rescues, just with the volatility of the ice, the airboats allow us to safely perform those rescues for both the people we're rescuing as well as the firefighters and other personnel that we need to transport to the area. And then I also have a low roughneck center console and a canoe. I don't use the canoe very often on the river, though.
That's a fleet of your own vessels that you're out on. It really shows hey, there's no such thing as a perfect boat. There's a perfect boat for the right environment in the right situation. But every body of water needs something a little different.
Absolutely.
So now, do you have barge traffic up there that far north?
We do, and we have a lot of it. You can have anywhere in a typical day, you can have 1 to 2 barges come through, or you can have 5, 6, 7, 8 barges come through.
Okay, I want to touch on that here in just a little bit when we get to another section. But I was curious if that was something that you had to contend with up there. So let's start with just how long have you been a conservation officer?
About 6 years now.
Okay. So in your 6 years, what are some of the most common mistakes that you see on the river? We talked about with Officer Volbricht and Officer Miller about kind of the boat ramp type stuff, the etiquette, and just the common sense almost, and the skills needed. But what do you see on the river that might be a little different than some of the lake environments?
Yeah, one of the more unique things about the river, for anybody that's been on any river probably knows, is the channel markers. Especially within the last, year and a half, with everybody that has had time off due to COVID and has gone out and bought boats, and they're now operating those boats on the river. We've actually run into a lot of people that don't understand what the channel markers mean, and that they're there for their safety, and for the safety of others. Certain people kind of think they can just operate wherever they'd like to operate on the river. And that's not the case, as some people have found out the hard way. Because being the river, we do have, you have the channel markers that mark the channel, but outside those channel markers, you have a lot of unknown hazards. You have sandbars, you have wing dams, you have log jams, stuff like that, that if you're not familiar with the river and you don't know they're there, it's best to stick to between the red and green channel markers. With our river conditions this year, the river's actually at its lowest, which is unusual. Normally we have high water. So this year it's actually presented an even bigger challenge.
Oh, sure.
And we've really tried to hit home with people that, with the low water, there's even more hazards. So they really need to be conscious of where the channel markers are, and they need to make sure that they're in the channel. So we've had multiple injuries on boats so far this year, with people getting outside of the channel markers and then either hitting something or running aground. And, when you stop suddenly like that, if you're not hanging on or if you're not sitting down, you're probably going to go flying and hit something.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
That's been a big issue this year, is the channel markers.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons I did a video, 11 minutes to boating safety. So I talked about the navigation, stand on giveaway, but also talked about, reds on the right as you're going upstream, and just the basics that most people don't quite understand. And
Yeah.
if you're new to boating, you've never been exposed to it. So take that little bit of time and get educated. Do you guys offer some courses or any material for river boaters that would be helpful for them?
Yeah, so we have our standard DNR watercraft safety course, which anybody that wants to can take it. And then on top of that, we have, just like other states, we have our Minnesota boating guide. And then we also have a Mississippi River boating guide, which is going to provide you with, the location of the channels, where the wing dams are at, where some of those other hazards are at. It's going to provide you with mile markers, in case you get into something out there and you need to give somebody your location. Those mile markers are a great way so that we can kind of narrow down where you're at. And it has a whole bunch of other information in it, the lock and dam information, emergency information, and then kind of provides those rules of the road for Mississippi.
Yeah, I would really recommend, because we have listeners from all over the U.S., really all over the world now. But somewhere in your local community, there's probably a resource that gives you some insights on the waters that you're going to be operating on. And like Brittany said, is they've got the inland lakes, they've got the river, and there's probably something for the Great Lakes sections as well that are in Minnesota. So there's resources out there. Just take a little bit of time and find them, and it's really going to help you avoid some of the the basic mistakes that you just may not understand, instead of jumping right in your boat and going out for the 4th of July weekend.
Absolutely. The 4th of July weekend is not a weekend I recommend learning how to how to operate out there.
Yeah, yeah. I'll ask you about some stories here in a little bit, but because I'm sure that you've seen some craziness there on the river. So what are a few things, three, four, five things that you wish all of the boaters knew that were coming out to boat on the river in your 40-mile section?
Yeah, so similar to what Officer Volbrecht and Officer Miller mentioned, it definitely all starts at the boat ramp. Um, I definitely recommend people take the time to practice, in the off season. Load your boat up, go to the local boat ramp that's not too busy, and just practice loading and unloading and backing a trailer and stuff like that, because it's just going to help expedite the process during those busy, 4th of July weekends and whatnot. Another thing would be know your boat. We stop plenty of people, on the river for various violations. And when we stop them, we go through a boat safety check. So we're looking for life jackets, fire extinguishers, horns and whistles, stuff like that. And it's actually quite amazing how many people don't know where those things are in their boat, which just goes to show if there was an emergency and you don't know where those things are, it could potentially cost somebody's life. So know your boat, know where you keep all those things. That way, one, when we check your boat, it goes a lot faster. And two, if an emergency does happen to come up, you're prepared and you know where all those things are. Another thing for boaters is that if you do get stopped by us, one, we're not out there to ruin your day. We're just out there to make sure that everyone's operating safely. That's our main goal. But listen to the instruction we're giving you, because we're giving you instruction for a reason. On the river, unlike lakes, on the river, if we're stopping fishing boats and stuff like that, most of the time they're using a trolling motor or something along those lines. And when we're pulling up to you and we ask you to shut that trolling motor off, it's for safety, because those trolling motors, especially if they're on spot lock, they have a tendency to swing the boat. And it's happened many times where they swing at the last second, and then somebody's risking getting, a foot pinched or fingers pinched or something like that. So when we ask you to, shut that off, it's just so that we can get up to you for everyone's safety. We don't want any pinched fingers or anything like that. So any of the instruction we're giving you when we're making a boat stop is for a reason, and generally it's a safety reason.
Yeah, I think that's a key is all of the DNR officers, the wildlife officers, even the Coast Guard folks that I've met over the years, they're doing this job because something about whether it's hunting or fishing or just being out on the water, they love it just like we do, and they want to make sure. I think it was Officer Miller that mentioned, you know, and I believe you've been involved in this as well as a search and rescue or a recovery operation, and they want to avoid that for the people that they're interacting with that are in their area. It's not that you want to write them a ticket. It's that you want to make sure that nothing bad happens to them and that everybody goes home and says, that was a great outing, not, oh my gosh, I can't believe that happened.
Absolutely, yeah. It's, those are the calls we don't like going to. So anything we can do to prevent that, both for ourselves and for, the potential people involved, that's why we do this job.
Yeah, and when you're dealing with, I don't know, I would assume that the current can be pretty swift up there at times. When you're dealing with that current, and water in itself is very powerful, and you add the current and all the other dangers of the river, man, there's just one little mistake can make things go the wrong direction, and it's why I think you're saying be prepared, be ready, know where that safety equipment is, know how to access it quickly. So if something does go wrong, that you can avoid a catastrophic event and minimize that.
Yep, absolutely.
So are there a few skills or things that are different from your experience on the river that you see maybe a lake boater come out and they say, man, let's try out this river situation. We're going to do some fishing or we just want to experience it. What's different when boating on the river from boating on just a regular lake?
Yeah, I think the main difference is the current. At different times of year, depending on the water levels, the current is different. It can be, when we get high water, that current is moving. And if you're not prepared for it, it can catch you off guard, especially in certain locations on the river. The current moves faster through the area than in other locations. So something specific, a specific skill for operating on the river would be, if you have to pull up to the gas dock or the access dock or something like that, if you've never done it before, it's a challenge with the current. You kind of have to learn to use that current to your advantage. And then if you add in any sort of wind, now you're battling the current and the wind, and it can get a little overwhelming if it's something that's new to you. I've ran into plenty of people that are new on the river, and they've mentioned the current and how difficult it can be sometimes. So I've tried to give them, some tips and tricks for working with the current to make docking and stuff like that easier. But that's probably one of the more challenging things in relation to the river that's different than, your local lake or anything like that.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. I grew up in Nebraska and went from boating on just, small little sandpit lakes for the most part, and then moved to the Missouri River. And I remember loading the boat up. I'm like, this is way different. It took a little bit to get there, dealing with that current and the winds and just the different environment. So you kind of teased us with you give them some tips and tricks. What are a couple of the big ones that you could share?
Well, it starts with knowing how your boat operates. As far as operating in the current, some boats have an easier throttle than other boats. Some boats, if you kick them in reverse, it kicks in a lot faster. So knowing how your throttle works would be the start of it. And I've actually recommended to people, go buy like a cheap ball buoy or something like that and take it to your local lake and practice kind of bumping up against that, and then take it to the river in an area that's, not well traveled or something. Don't do it in the middle of the channel or anything like that, but take it to like a small little bay where the current's still kind of moving through, and then practice bumping up against that ball buoy. Because if you hit that ball buoy, it's, not going to do any damage to your boat versus hitting a dock or something like that. So practice bumping up against something like that before, you attempt bumping up to the gas dock or the loading dock or something like that. That can definitely help build your confidence as a boat operator and help prevent future damage.
Yeah, I put together a training program for new boaters called the Best Boat Captain on the Water, and I developed from when I sold boats how to operate your boat. I created these 9 building blocks, and that's one of my building blocks is, learn how your boat goes in and out of gear, what happens when you put different inputs into the steering and the throttle, and then put it all together by practicing on a buoy, because it really is. It takes the stress out, but you understand how your boat maneuvers and how different inputs impact. And that's great to do it with the current as well, because it certainly does speed things up at times or slow them down. And you've got to be quicker and more precise with the inputs in dealing with those currents for sure. That's a great tip. I like that.
Yep.
So go ahead. Was there something else you wanted to add there?
Nope.
Perfect. So any advice? So if one of your best friends goes out and buys a new boat, and they say, "Hey, Brittany, we're so excited. We've got this new boat. What are a couple of tips that you would give them to say, hey, here's some things to do before that first time you hit the water or the first time out? What are some tips that you'd have for them to make sure they have a safe time and a fun time?"
Yeah, definitely number one piece of advice would be know and be familiar with the regulations for whatever area you're planning on boating, because different bodies of water can have different regulations, as far as the possible equipment you need, the registration you need, stuff like that. And then to go along with that would be have all of the required equipment. Have all the wearable life jackets you need, have the throwable device, fire extinguishers, horns, whistles, flares if you need them. Make sure you have all those safety devices for one, if you get stopped by the game warden or the Coast Guard or whomever may be out there, the sheriff's department. And then, of course, if that emergency situation does arise, you want to have all of that required equipment. And then do your research on the area. And as I mentioned earlier, this is kind of something we've battled with in the last year and a half with all the new boat owners, is know the area you're going to boat. Know where those wing dams are. Know where the channel markers are. Know what the channel markers mean. The no wake zones. Know where those are at. The gas stations. Stuff like that, that's going to help you, one, enjoy your time out on whatever body of water you're going out on, and two, it's going to prevent any damage to your boat, any emergency situations, stuff like that.
Yeah, I like the know where the gas stations are and the hours that they keep. On the river especially, you get caught with low fuel and you're too far away from a gas pump, or they're closed at that time. You're at 7 o'clock at night and you want to keep going. You could be in a bad situation. That's a great tip, one I haven't heard before. So thank you for that.
Yep.
So you've been on the water for 6 years as a conservation officer, and I'm sure you've seen some things that just drive you crazy. What are some of the unwritten rules, the maybe personal pet peeves that you have that you see there on the Mississippi?
Yeah. I guess one of the big, pet peeves or concerns that we have is the people that underestimate the water and the weather. People, boating up here is obviously much different than boating on the ocean or even the Great Lakes. But we still get, those weather systems that move through that can drastically change the way the river operates. Whether it's, a heavy rainstorm that can then raise the water level, which then breaks free, log jams or anything that may be on shore that can get swept down, that now causes water hazards that sometimes you can't see. But also, in my section of the river, we have an area of the river that's called Lake Pepin, which is kind of like a big lake where the river comes in and then it comes out the other end. But it's I think it's about 8 miles or so across, something like that, maybe a little less. But it's a large area that if the wind picks up, if a storm system moves through, you can get 3-4 foot whitecaps out there.
Oh, wow.
Where if you're operating, a little John boat or something like that, you're going to find yourself in a sandwich you don't want to be in when the lake kicks up like that. So don't underestimate the water. Don't underestimate the weather. We all know water kills, and it kills quickly when it does. So be prepared. Check the weather systems, before you head out. Stuff like that, because we have had it before where storms may pop out of nowhere, and we get the call for the little John boat out there that's now taking on water, and then we also have to put ourselves in harm's way to go rescue those people. So just being prepared for that situation can help keep everybody safe. And then another pet peeve we really have, and I think this speaks for all, any law enforcement officer that works a body of water, is gunnel riders. Whether there's a railing up there or not, just don't do it, because it is possible to slip under that railing. And I think, as most of us know, if you slip under that railing or off of that bow, the first place you're going to go is under the boat. And most boat operators, most boats cannot stop in time to prevent you from getting hit by the prop. We've seen some pretty nasty prop injuries, and it's just something that it's not worth the risk. I know it's cool riding up there. You feel like, you're on the Titanic or whatever, but it's not worth the injuries if you do happen to fall off or get bounced off or anything like that. If that boat hits something, if it hits a log jam or another wake, it's hard to hang on. And we don't want to see anybody going under the boat and getting hit by the prop. It's not a good day for anybody when that happens. So just don't do it. And then when we stop boats, this is kind of something we've run into quite a bit as well. When we stop boats, we try to do it in a location where we're not a hazard to any of the other traffic that's moving through. So we try to do it, to the side of the channel, or if we have a bay that's open that we know we can safely make a boat stop in, we'll direct the boat to get out of the channel and meet us over in the bay or wherever we determine the stop at. And we'll activate, depending on what boat we're in, we'll activate our emergency lights on the boat, little red and blue flashy lights. And there is actually a law in Minnesota, I can't speak for other states, but there's a law in Minnesota that, very similar to operating on the roadway, if you see, flashy lights on the roadway, the law states you're supposed to slow down and move over if it's safe to do so. It's the same for the waterway. All the time this happens. We make a boat stop, and then here comes a big cabin cruiser that's not paying any attention. And, they push off a big wake when they go by, and then that then puts us at risk as well as the boat we've stopped at risk. Because as we all know, those wakes, they can be big sometimes if it's a big cabin cruiser that's going by, and, we're risking pinching fingers, pinching legs, people going overboard, the boat smashing together, stuff like that. So if you see, a sheriff boat or a DNR boat or any boat with the flashy lights on, just slow down and, make your way past us, and then you can throttle back down.
Yeah, I love that. It starts with awareness and then just basic courtesy, understanding that your boat puts out a wake and understanding at what speeds it puts out the biggest wake, which is, plowing through the water, going 15.
Yep.
Will really send other boats a rocking. But there's two other things that I want to highlight is the sitting on the gunnel. That's something I've never talked about that, but it's a big one. It's so easy to lose balance or to, not be holding on or really paying attention, awareness again, and have something bad happen. But I want to talk about the logs. So in some boating areas, there's some of those underwater obstructions that, that log that's just under the surface. Do you have any tips for, as much as you run your boat in that environment, any tips for being on the lookout and what to look for to avoid those situations, areas of the river or bends where they're more likely to be? Anything like that you can give with your experience?
Yeah. Probably the number one piece of advice would be, for me on the river, I generally always have somebody with me, another partner, whether it be another one of my DNR partners or the sheriff's department. Having somebody else with you that can help spot those hazards. So if we're on the river, a lot of the deadheads, the big logs that we get that float down, that sometimes you can't see them at all until you're kind of right up on them. And one of the if you're lucky enough, one of the ways to spot them is sometimes they'll just be like a little tiny stick, like a little branch off that bigger log sticking up. You might think it's just a tiny little stick, but lo and behold, it's attached to a much larger log that definitely has the capabilities of taking out your lower unit or something like that. So having that other person in the boat to help spot what could potentially be a much bigger problem under the water definitely helps. I highly recommend that. Another thing for the river would be generally if there's a hazard under the water, you're going to see a change in the surface water and how it's acting in that area. If it's kind of like branching out from that particular area or swirling around, that's a hint that there could potentially be a hazard just below the surface that you can't see. And that comes with, knowing how the water acts normally and then knowing how it acts when there's something there. And that just comes from years and hours and all of that being out there and just having that background experience.
Yeah, that's awesome, and it's something that as a new boater you may not even think of to pay attention to the surface of the water and is it smooth? What's the current looking like? And so those those little swirly things. And here's what I do: we boat at times on the Tennessee River with my in-laws. And I make it a game for my daughters up in the bow. I say, okay, you girls are in charge of looking for logs and looking for things in the water. They're pointing out sticks that are 100 yards off our starboard bow that we're not even heading that direction, but it keeps them engaged. It gives them something fun to do. And there's been times when I miss something that they caught, and it's having those extra set of eyes, just being aware of it is helpful. But I really like that, reading the water. That's a great tip for folks.
We've had.
Oh, go ahead.
We've had a couple instances of like the channel buoys, the red and green buoys. We've had a couple of those, get hit and then they sink.
Yep.
But they don't sink enough to not be a hazard. They sink just below the surface. And we've had a couple of them where the only way we've been able to, locate those sunken buoys and put, attach a floating buoy or something like that to them until the core can get out to fix them. But the only way we've been able to spot them is by watching the way the water operates. Because you can see we could see where the water was going around something. And that helped us find those sunken buoys so that no one else hit them.
Yeah, exactly. And I'll tell you, my brother hit a log and tore off a lower unit of a friend's boat when we were on vacation one year, and it stops your weekend instantly. There's nothing that stops a boating outing more than losing your lower unit. So it's something to be aware of for sure. So let's go into some experiences and some stories that that you may have been involved in. So I've read some of the articles and seen some of the reports that you've put out. And what are some of your best or worst experiences that you can share that would teach a lesson? Something that, man, it's better to learn it with Brittany's story than to have to learn it on your own.
Yeah. I think for most of us that work on the water, our worst experiences are going to be the boat crashes and the drownings that occur. Whether those drownings result from boat crashes or what, no matter what the situation is, that's always kind of a bad day for everyone involved.
Oh, sure.
And the thing with those is almost all of them can be prevented in some way, shape, or form. Whether that's by, keeping to operating within your ability, slowing down if you're unfamiliar with the area, stuff like that, operate within your ability to operate. Don't try to show off or anything like that, because most of the time someone's going to end up getting hurt. And then wearing your life jacket. Almost all drownings, if not all drownings, can be prevented by wearing your life jacket. In this particular section of the river, I do have a lock and dam in the area, and almost every year we get a drowning or a boat crash of some sort up in that area, which partially stems from people not knowing the hazards or the dangers when operating around a lock or dam. But as far as the drownings go, we just had one a couple weeks ago, where if a life jacket had been worn, the situation would have ended a lot different than it did. So, those worst experiences should hopefully lead to lessons learned to have better experiences. But, as we all know, those experiences are going to happen, and as long as somebody learns from those experiences, hopefully more of those experiences will be prevented.
Yeah, and I think you guys' hearts are in to protect everybody, so that nobody has to go through that, because you're involved in the worst of the worst situations, and they're avoidable. Understanding that that's where a DNR officer, wildlife, Coast Guard, that's where their heart's at, is to make sure that you as a boater don't have to go through those situations. And it just takes a few simple things and awareness to really, really, really reduce that risk and make this a very safe hobby.
Yeah, definitely. So, but on a lighter note, some of our best experiences would definitely be the community connections that are made on the river. Most of the time when we're stopping boats, it's for minor violations. Maybe they're missing a letter in their registration or something like that. And it provides us a chance to not only, educate the operator and the passengers, but also to get to know them, and hopefully leave a good lasting impression on them. A lot of the people that operate on my section of the river, they're locals. I mean, they're the people I go to the grocery store with. They're the people that, I see all around town getting coffee at the local coffee shop or the bakery or whatever like that. So just taking that chance on the river to start to get to know them is just going to help me in the long run. So that might be a little selfish, but that's just how I prefer to operate.
Well, yeah, and like I said, there's a common interest. You're out there because you love nature, you love getting on the water, you love hunting or fishing. There's something about the outdoors that's drawn you to this career path. The same thing that takes me to the water. I love the water. There's that commonality that even though you're in uniform and you've got the badge and the all the other equipment, you're there because you love the same environment and the same type of things, and I think that's key to remember. So, Brittany, one question I meant to ask earlier, but I didn't, was the come back to the barges. What do you recommend when you're out on the river and you're operating and you see a big 100-foot barge coming through that's loaded down? What recommendations do you have on how to approach, how to operate, things to do to make sure that encounter is a safe one?
Yeah. Number one thing would be give them space. Give them space to operate. And in certain sections of the river I cover, some sections are much narrower. Some sections are going around, sharp turns and stuff like that. And it's just give them as much room to operate as possible, while you're still, operating in a safe manner as well. So I'm not asking you to go beach your boat on the rocks to let the barge go through, but give them space to operate in that area. And if it's possible, if they're going around, because we get some really big barges that move through, I mean, way longer than 100 feet. And for them to operate around some of the sharp turns that we have, if it's possible, pull into a marina or pull into a bay and just let them operate around that curve and then continue on their way. Because they can't, similar to a semi on the road, they can't see every area around the barge. So it's going to make them feel a lot better knowing that there's nobody in harm's way. If you just give them their space to do what they need to do. The barge operators are pretty good about, well, one, they're awesome at maneuvering the barges. I don't even want to know how much training they have to go through to be able to operate barges through some of the stuff they operate through. But they're pretty good about letting people know if they're potentially going to be a hazard, or if they are a hazard. We had one summer a couple years ago where it was like every week we were having issues with people getting in the barge's way and not moving, whether they just weren't paying attention or they weren't familiar with how barges operate, or we had a couple instances where people were truly, they couldn't get their motor started and stuff like that. The barges, they have a warning system, so to say. They'll give one horn blast for, warning saying, hey, beep, beep, barge coming through type of thing. And then each horn blast after that, counts as like a different warning level. So if you hear 5 horn blasts, that's, you need to get out of the way and you need to get out of the way.
Yeah,
right
you're talking
now.
serious issues.
Yeah. So give them their space, be respectful of them. They're out there doing a job, and in this particular part of the area, that job is, they're transporting, a lot of the times they're transporting grain and corn and stuff like that, so that all the rest of us can, eat and be merry type of thing. So let them do their job, give them space. If you got to sit in a bay for 10 minutes, sit in a bay for 10 minutes, have a snack, have a drink, do whatever. Let them get by and then continue on your day.
Yeah. Any comments on kind of their, after the barge passes, the water and any undercurrents to look out for?
Yeah, they definitely do kick off quite a little swirl behind them. That if you're not familiar, it's very similar to operating below like a dam, or in an eddy or something like that. And if you're not familiar with how the water operates behind a barge, I don't recommend, operating immediately behind them. Let them get past, give them, 100, 200 feet, let that water kind of settle, and then continue on your way. Because it does get pretty turbulent back there. So they got some big props that are kicking off, water in all different directions, and it's swirling around like crazy. And if you're not familiar with it and you're not prepared for it, it could be a bad day.
Yeah, I've been told this story. I don't remember it, but before my family got into boating for real, I was like 6 months or a year old, and my mom and dad went out with some friends and on the Missouri River, and a barge went by, and that undercurrent caught the 17-foot boat or 18-foot boat they were on, and I almost didn't make it to host this podcast, I guess. So yeah, it's something to be aware of, and just know that can happen, and be on the lookout, stay clear of it.
Yep, absolutely.
So, Brittany, you also mentioned a lock. I've never been through a lock myself. It's on my list, and on the Tennessee River, there's a trip that I want to take that will take me through one. What advice, what recommendations, what experiences have you had locking in and out and going through one to be aware of, extra equipment that you might need, things like that?
Yeah. anytime you operate through a lock, you know, if you've never done it before, it's very intimidating. I remember the first time I did it, I didn't quite know what I was doing or what was going to happen or anything like that, and it was intimidating. So, you know, one of the best first steps is if you know somebody that's locked through or anything like that, you know, ask them kind of some advice and whatnot. And then you can also call your lock staff. They have a general phone number that you can call, and you can ask them, you know, kind of what their process is. Most of the locks on the Mississippi operate the same way because they're all run by the Corps, and you know, they're more than willing to, you know, tell you what needs to be done in order to lock through, and that can kind of help ease your nerves the first time, is just kind of knowing what to expect. You know, our lock and dam, they operate almost year round, but generally most of their traffic obviously comes in the summer months. And when you enter the lock, make sure you're obeying whatever the lock staff is telling you to do. They're going to be up on the wall above you, and they're going to hand you the ropes to hold on to so that you don't break loose from the wall when the water is either coming up or coming down. So just listening to what they have to say, because they're the pros at this. You know, they do it multiple times a day for multiple months out of the year, and most of them have been there for years and years and years. So just, you know, entering the lock at a no-wake speed, because you don't want to smash anybody into the cement walls, especially if it's going to be a full lock through where they can stack in 20 boats if they want. Entering it slowly, grabbing whatever rope you're directed to grab to. Do not tie the rope onto your boat. Don't do it. It's not going to end well, especially if the water is going to be going down. Your boat is no longer going to be in the water if you tie the ropes onto your boat. So don't do it. But, you know, once you're in and they close the lock doors, just hang on to that rope. And then when it's safe to get out, they'll open the other end of the lock and away you go. And just make sure you exit at a no-wake speed, because otherwise, you know, you can cause damage to other boats or even your own boat. And then you can get on your merry way. So it's intimidating the first time you do it, but it's certainly not, you know, it's not once you've done it once, it's kind of like riding a bike.
Yeah, I'm nervous about it. Like I said, I've never been through the situation, and you know, I feel I'm a fairly competent boat operator, but it's just that new experience. So I'm interested to hear your advice. I appreciate that. So you're not actually tied on to anything other than the rope, you know, the long rope that they're going to give you to go up and down, because it's got to be adjustable. I didn't even think about that.
Yep. Yeah, they just give you a rope and you just hang on to it, and up and down you go. So as long as you don't tie it onto your boat, which I've seen many people do, and then it's a rush to get it untied before the water starts to change. Yeah, you just hang on to that, and you can I recommend, you know, especially for some of the nicer boats. My boat's beat to all heck with how often isn't it? But some of the nicer boats, you know, I recommend putting out some bumpers just to protect you from that lock wall. And then away you go. Once they, you know, light the green light and open the doors, there you go. You've done it.
Well, that gives me some more confidence to do it this summer. It's been on the list, but we just haven't made it happen yet. So I'm excited about that, and I hope to make a video of it going through and sharing it for other folks that want to do that same adventure, but just haven't quite got the courage to jump in yet. So thank you for that, Brittany. That's great. Well, this has been a fun conversation and a helpful conversation for all of those riverboaters out there. Anything that we didn't talk about that you think we should mention that's worth people knowing about or being aware of?
I guess just two things that come with being a prepared boater and a prepared recreationalist is invest in a good quality boat first aid kit, because those injuries do happen, whether it happens on your boat or it happens on a boat you come across. Have a good, they sell them online, you can buy them on Amazon or anywhere else. Just a good first aid kit that's in a waterproof container of some sort, that could help you with any injury that you come across the water until emergency personnel can get there, is always a great idea. And then a tow membership, whether you're a new boat operator or you've been operating a boat for decades, the time will come when you need a tow, whether it's because you ran aground or you hit something and took out your lower unit or you have motor problems, anything like that. Get a tow membership because it's going to help you out, and it's going to be a lot cheaper than if you have to call a tow without a membership.
That's for sure.
We're on pretty good standing with the tow that operates out of Red Wing, and just kind of listening to some of the stories they have to tell, of what people have done on the river that they've needed a tow to get out of, and just how much they cost if they don't have a membership. I got to say, I'm in the wrong line of business for that. So
Yeah, you're talking 5 to 10 times more than the 150, less than $200 to join CETO or Boat US. Do you have a different operator up there, or is it one of those two?
we have Towboat US, yep,
Oh,
and their membership I think is like $90 a year.
yeah.
Versus if you don't have them and need a tow, I think she said it's like $170 an hour from the second they get the call. So for me, that $90 a year is worth it.
Yeah, I would agree. The cheap insurance for sure. And I've also
Yep.
been told that from Kristen, the president of CETO, was on a program I did. And she said that their local captains, and I'm sure Boat US does something similar, but they'll give you, if you've never operated that section of the Mississippi River and you're taking a trip and doing a little adventure, they'll give you some inside knowledge of, hey, here's in this section of the river, you really have to be careful because there's some underwater obstructions that you can't see, or it's not marked very well, or whatever. And they'll give you real-time updates on what's going on in that section of water that you're operating in. So there's other advantages to those as well of local knowledge.
Absolutely. I mean, your tow companies, your marinas, um, your gas docks, those people are on the river more than I am. They're an excellent source of knowledge, and they're more than willing to, spend 5 minutes letting you know, hey, there's, this hazard here, avoid this area, stick to the channel in this area. They're a wealth of knowledge, so take that 5 minutes, ask many questions you have to ask, because you're going to save them time later, and it's going to be a better day for everybody.
Yeah, yeah, and just like Brittany and Matt and Bryce that I talked to here in Minnesota conservation officers, is the people that run the marinas, that are the captains on the towboats. They love the water just like we do, and they love to talk about it. And if they found that, hey, this buoy just went underwater, just got run over last night, they're going to have that real time info, and they're just going to be fun people to chat up, because they have the same interests. So, Brittany, I really appreciate you taking time out to have this conversation and share your insight, your knowledge with all of our listeners. It is very much appreciated, and it's been fun.
Not a problem. Thanks for having me.
Let's pull up the anchor and run this podcast back to the dock. We'll be back again with another helpful and fun episode next time. If you'd like to be a guest on the podcast, visit boatbuyerssecretweapon.com/guest, and I'll help offer insights into your boat research and shopping experience. Also, we'd appreciate it if you took just 2 minutes to rate and review this podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. It helps others find us so we can help more boaters. By the way, if you already own a boat and experience a little stress handling your boat or pontoon in some situations, visit bestboatcaptainonthewater.com for a quick video and all the details. Now, before we go, I want to leave you with a few first-time boating tips for when you own your new boat. Number 1, know your local boating laws, basic navigation rules, and how to operate your boat safely. It'll make boating even more fun for everyone. 2, be aware of your wake at all times and pay attention to no wake zones because you are responsible for your wake. When maneuvering at slow speeds, you can put out an enormous wake. If going slow, be courteous, save some fuel, and drop down to idle speed, just in forward gear to ensure there is no wake. This could save you an expensive ticket and will keep you from being that guy on your waterway. Number 3, boats do not have headlights. They have docking lights, specifically made for seeing in tight quarters and docking. Do not turn your docking lights on while cruising down the water. It can blind other boaters and is very dangerous and, again, could save you an expensive ticket. Number 4, follow the maintenance schedule for your boat. Change the oil, impeller, gear lube, winterize if you need to winterize in your area. Inspect your trailer tires, bearings, and grease the hubs if you're a trailer boater to ensure you don't experience expensive and unnecessary repairs that will impact your boating time. Number 5, always double check your plug is in, your battery is charged, and the fuel is full before heading out for a day on the water. It could just save your boating day. And if you're a trailer boater, I've got a few extra tips. Number 1, at the boat ramp, prepare your boat, your gear, and your guests in the staging area. Then, when you're ready, back down the ramp, unload the boat, head to the parking lot, and right back down to your boat to be fast and courteous to your fellow boaters and don't tie up that ramp unnecessarily. Next, use transom tie-down straps when trailing your boat. Very bad things can happen if you don't, and they do happen. 3, check everything in the boat is secure before heading down the road. Seat cushions, gear, keys, towels, even tubes and lily pads can get blown out when pulling your boat down the highway or interstate. And most important, have fun. Enjoy your boat and get on the water as much as possible because life truly is better on a boat. Until next time, this is your friend in boating, Captain Matt.